the Dream Street. When Maple Ridge Estates first opened in 2014, it was a dream come true for working families. Manicured lawns, pastel-painted homes, and a small park where children laughed under oak trees. The HOA promised community harmony and maintenance excellence. People believed it, especially David and Alicia Carter, a young couple who had saved for years to buy their first home. The HOA dues were a few hundred a month. Not cheap, but peace had a price. At least that's what they thought. The first signs of trouble appeared in the form of letters. Alicia opened her mailbox one morning to find a bright yellow envelope stamped HOA Notice of Violation. She frowned. David, they're saying our garbage cans were visible for 10 minutes after pickup. David sighed. It's ridiculous. I was at work. It was windy that day. The fine, $75. The warning, repeated violations may result in legal action or property lien. They laughed it off at first, thinking it was just overzealous enforcement. But within weeks, neighbors started receiving similar letters, for grass being an inch too tall, for parking in their own driveway overnight, for having non-neutral flower colors. When a retired teacher, Mrs. Herrera, got fined for hanging a small flag on her porch, people began to whisper. Something about this HOA felt off. Every HOA had one person who ran it like their kingdom. At Maple Ridge, that person was Brian Keller, the HOA president for 6 years. Tall, confident, always in a crisp polo with the HOA logo, Brian lived 3 houses away from the Carters. He had a background in private consulting, whatever that meant, and liked reminding people that he knew how to get things done. When neighbors complained about unfair fines, Brian smiled and said, "Rules are rules. They keep property values high." But people noticed something strange. Brian's own lawn was often overgrown, his car parked in the street overnight. Yet no violations ever came his way. One night, during the monthly HOA meeting in the community center, David spoke up. "Mr. Keller, we just want fairness. Why are residents being fined for small things while board members seem exempt?" Brian leaned back, smiling coolly. "Because board members actually understand the regulations, Mr. Carter. Maybe you should run for the board next election if you think you can do better." The room went silent. That was how it started, not with anger, but with a challenge. David couldn't let it go. He started reading the HOA's bylaws, financial reports, and meeting minutes, documents that most residents ignored. What he found didn't make sense. Over $80,000 in administrative expenses. $20,000 paid to BK Consulting Services. When he checked the business license online, his jaw dropped. BK Consulting was registered under Brian Keller's own name. He was paying himself from HOA funds. David shared the discovery with Alicia. He's been siphoning money through fake maintenance contracts. This is theft. They told their neighbor, Mrs. Herrera, who told her son, who told half the street. Within a week, an underground movement formed, quiet but determined. They called themselves the Residents for Reform. The next meeting was packed. More than 50 residents crammed into the small hall, faces flushed with frustration. David stood, clutching printed papers. "These are copies of bank statements showing payments to BK Consulting. That's Brian Keller's company," gasped. Brian's calm facade cracked. "That's a legitimate vendor." David interrupted. "A vendor with your name and your P.O. box. You've been billing the HOA for fake services." Brian's voice rose. "That's slander." But the room had turned against him. Residents began shouting. "We want an audit. Call the police. Resign, Keller." The treasurer, Mark Liu, pale and sweating, admitted quietly, "I didn't know." Brian handled all contracts himself. The tension was electric. Brian slammed his gavel, declaring, "Meeting adjourned," and stormed out. But it was too late, the story was out. That night, someone leaked the audit files to the local news. 2 days later, a reporter from the Austin Herald stood outside the Maple Ridge gates. The headline the next morning read, "HOA President under investigation for self-dealing and misuse of funds." Neighbors watched the story on TV in disbelief. Brian denied everything, claiming the community was attacking his reputation. But the county launched a civil audit anyway. The HOA board fractured. 2 members resigned, saying they'd been kept in the dark. Brian stopped attending meetings entirely, but the fines kept coming, automatically generated through his online system. Residents refused to pay. The HOA's bank account froze. Trash collection stopped. The park lawn grew wild. For a few weeks, chaos returned, but it was free chaos. In October, under pressure from residents and local authorities, a special election was announced. It was the first Democratic HOA vote in years. The community center overflowed with people. Folding chairs lined the walls. Each household received 1 ballot. David Carter stood at the front, nervous but resolute. He wasn't a politician, but he believed in fairness, and in the idea that neighbors deserved a say. He spoke simply, "I'm not here to control anyone. I just want transparency. We pay into this community. It belongs to us, not one man's pocket." Applause filled the room. When Brian Keller entered, escorted by police officers due to pending investigations, the mood shifted. He sat silently in the back, eyes cold. Ballots were cast. The counting took 2 tense hours. When the results were read, David had won by 47 votes to 9. The crowd erupted. Some cried. Some hugged. For the first time in years, Maple Ridge felt united. Weeks later, auditors confirmed what David had discovered. Over $120,000 in community funds had been misused. Brian Keller was charged with fraud and embezzlement but took a plea deal, repaying part of the money. The new board, led by David, Alicia, and Mrs. Herrera, began rebuilding. They reduced unnecessary fines, published monthly financial reports, and opened meetings to all residents. They also repaired what mattered most: trust. One afternoon, David stood in the park, now freshly mowed again, watching kids play. Mrs. Herrera joined him and smiled. "You did it," she said. He shook his head. "We did. The community just needed to remember it belonged to everyone." The autumn breeze rustled the trees, carrying laughter and the faint sound of a basketball bouncing down the street. The dream of Maple Ridge was alive again, not because of its rules but because of its people. Epilogue: the lesson. Homeowners associations can protect or poison a community. In the wrong hands, power turns personal and control replaces care. But when ordinary residents stand together, when they demand honesty, fairness, and transparency, even the most broken neighborhood can heal. Moral: house with garden. A neighborhood isn't defined by its rules, but by the people brave enough to question them.